Welcome back to Kappa Math. Today we're going to be discussing how to evaluate trigonometric quantities. I've heard a strategy on how to evaluate these quantities using some finger tricks. There are different approaches, but the approach I like to take and the approach that is more mathematically correct is to first rewrite in terms of the reference angle. In order to do that, we need to know the signs of the different trig functions in each quadrant, quadrants 1 through 4. So a little mnemonic device to remember this is all students take calculus, and I've also heard a smart trig class, whatever works for you. So what these stand for, ASTC, is all, meaning all of the trig functions, cosine, sine, and tangent are all positive in quadrant 1. Sine is positive in quadrant 2, tangent is positive in quadrant 3, and cosine is positive in quadrant 4. Okay? So now let's take a look at our triangles that we're going to need to know for these problems. So the first is the 45-45 right triangle. To draw this up, all you basically need to know is that the legs of the triangle are each equal to 1 unit, and then the hypotenuse is equal to square root of 2 units. Okay, and a few people get tripped up with the 30-60-90 triangle. It's really not that hard to memorize. The thing I like to remember is that the smallest length of the sides of the triangle is opposite the smallest angle. So the smallest goes opposite smallest, and the hypotenuse is always 2 units. And of course, opposite is square root 3, and if you'll notice, square root 3 always is across pi over 3. So you can remember it like that too. All right. So we also have our good old SOHCAHTOA from geometry drawn up here. We know that sine corresponds to cosecant, cosine corresponds to secant, and tangent corresponds to cotangent. These are always things I like to draw up on tests because they make things much more easier to visualize, and the information is right there to pull out so we can go through the problem much more quickly and efficiently, okay? So in order to rewrite in terms of the reference angle, first thing we're going to need to do is evaluate the angle that we're dealing with. So we have cosine 7 pi over 6. So we need to determine what quadrant 7 pi over 6 is in. Okay, so I've already started doing it here, but 7 pi over 6 is in quadrant 3. So if we take a look in quadrant 3, only tangent is positive. So all the other functions are negative. So cosine is going to be negative in quadrant 3. Okay, so since we've accounted for the sine, now we're just going to rewrite in terms of the reference angle, which is just pi over 6. So we take out the 7. So negative cosine pi over 6. All right, so now we can look at SOHCAHTOA. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. Take a look at pi over 6, adjacent square root 3 over hypotenuse 2. And we cannot forget the negative that we had out here. Negative square root 3 over 2, is our final answer. Okay, so let's take a look at sine of 5 pi over 6. Okay, so first, 5 pi over 6 is in what quadrant? It is in quadrant 2. Sine is positive in quadrant 2. Quadrant 2, sine is positive. So now let's rewrite in terms of a reference angle. So sine of pi over 6. Okay, so sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Let's locate pi over 6, opposite over hypotenuse. So 1/2, and that is our answer for this problem. So I have a few more here. Bear with me on the layout here. I'm just trying to get you the best view as possible. And these, by the way, are all quantities I've had to evaluate on tests. So it's not like I'm pulling out easy problems. These are all real problems that I've dealt with. So hopefully these are similar to ones you'll get on tests as well. Okay, so cool. We have tangent of negative pi over 4. Okay, hold up. This angle right here is not in quadrant 1. Check out this negative out front. Now we are going in the clockwise direction when we are locating this angle. So we're going to go backwards. We are starting at 0. Now we're going to spin over to quadrant 4. Okay, so this is in quadrant 4. Now, tangent is negative in quadrant 4. So let's account for that. Cool. So now we have negative tangent of pi over 4. All right. So now we've got that. Let's find tangent. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. Locate pi over 4, opposite over adjacent. 1 over 1, negative 1 over 1, because we got this. All right, so that simplifies to just negative 1. Okay, let's take a look at another one. Now we are dealing with reciprocated trig identities. So all these are being our final answers are going to be flipped in the end, okay? So now we've got secant of negative 3 pi over 4. Uh-oh, we've got another negative out here. So we're going clockwise once again, and we are staying, oh, no, we are not. Now we're going to find ourselves in quadrant 3 if we visualize our unit circle, okay? So quadrant 3, secant corresponds to cosine. In quadrant 3, cosine is negative. So we're going to have negative secant 3. That is not the reference angle. Just negative secant of pi over 4. Cool? Cool. So now we've got secant of pi over 4. Well, secant corresponds to cosine, so let's locate pi over 4. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, but secant is hypotenuse over adjacent. So we've got hypotenuse over adjacent, negative square root 2 over 1, or negative square root 2. All right? Let's take a look at a couple more here, and then we'll be done. And hopefully you'll be able to do some of these problems on your own. Okay, so we've got cosecant 5 pi over 3. Okay. First things first, which quadrant is 5 pi over 3 in? Well, that's in quadrant 4. Okay, cosecant corresponds with sine. Is sine positive in quadrant 4? No, it is not. So we have negative cosecant of pi over 3. Okay, cosecant, again, corresponds with sine. So cosecant is going to be hypotenuse over opposite. Find pi over 3. Hypotenuse over opposite. So 2 over the square root of 3. And that's our final answer. My professor never asked us to rationalize. She thought it was a waste of time, and I kind of agree because it's really the same answer. So I'm not going to go over how to rationalize right now. Okay, so we have the last one here. We have cotangent of 5 pi over 4. 5 pi over 4 is in quadrant 3. Is cotangent positive in quadrant 3? Yes, it is. So we have positive cotangent of pi over 4. Okay, so cotangent is adjacent over opposite. We've got adjacent over opposite, so 1 over 1, which simplifies down to 1. And that's really it. That's all you have to do. Those are the basics. I hope you found this video useful. If so, give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you next time.